Музон крутой, конечно. Нормально слышно, да? Или поднять чуть? Могу поднять чуть. Березу? Не, яблочный. О, Крис Уилсон. Добро пожаловать, говорят. Спасибо, что дошли. Это что мы... Так. Сначала будет... Ого. Они отдельно выделяют то, что метагейм поменяется. 19 новых гемов, вау. Ой-ой-ой. Они PoE делать сложнее. Рояль! 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 The fuck? Окей, тюд. PoE Рояль! Вау! Класс. Найс. А это когда гонок доберут? Нифига себе. Рояль. О, рояль, это класс. О, много веков назад люди сюда приехали. Мы вернулись, чтобы восстановить наши, найти заново наши реликвии. Но Аркласт держит секреты при себе. Мы должны вытащить его из складки Аркласта. О, построить что-то надо. What the fuck? You know violence. We know trade. Retrieve our relics and we'll strike a deal. Получи наши релики, и мы с тобой обменяемся, заключив сделку. We will follow the path of our forebears to discover their unknown fate. Мы будем за кем-то там идти, чтобы добыть их бабки, в общем. 19 новых гемов. Шторм, Рейн. Ну, это отдельно посмотрим. Экспедиция, говорят, называется. О, ну я из экспедиции в экспедицию. Это моя лига, получается. Начнем с лиги Expedition. Значит, давно некий Killgorn Explorers пришел, там что-то, да? Тра-та-та. Встретим группу Killgornов, которые идут искать артефакт их предков. Они недооценили опасность Рейкласта, и им нужна помощь. Пока идешь по Рейкласту, встретите типа деревушки старые. Ага. Ну, короче, они выкапывать будут трупаки, и они будут с вами драться. Нормально ломают. Почти как Эбис. Ага, ты ставишь, короче, динамиты вот так вот в цепочку. И должен планировать, как они взрываются. Это типа смесь Легиона, вообще Абиса. Прикольно. Потому когда ты нажимаешь, то все, кто взорвались, те вылезают из-под земли и начинают с вами драться. Стройка, наоборот, это расстройка. Ну, там одни попроще, другие посложнее. Те, что посложнее, специальными значками отмечены. Так нет, наоборот. Ты сам детонируешь, а потом уже берешь самого. Восставшие мертвецы. Раскоп очка. Раскоп очка.
The ancient Kalguran explorers built structures on Rayclust, and you may encounter remnants of these at excavation sites. These remnants have various modifiers on them that, when
Так, короче, кроме всего прочего, есть просто еще реминанты с дополнительными модами, видимо. Да, там больше модов, но при этом дропов больше. Ой, нормально усекает. Тяжело тебе без армора, да? Так, награды. Значит, это артефакты.
The Kalguran traders have made this expedition to Rayclust in order to recover their ruined artifacts. There are many different types of artifacts.
Разные типы артефактов.
A different set of them, with a unique way they want to trade them from you. For this expansion, we really wanted to play with the idea of having NPCs that want to trade with you in different ways. So we have themed their behaviors around the concepts of gambling,
Ну, короче, то, что нам будут предлагать в обмен на штуки, на артефакты, будет зависеть от того, какие артефакты продаем. Так. А, тут... Ну, короче, не торговли вводят из Скайрима. Типа можно торговаться.
Grog is an average man pushed into Rayclust's dangers. He's helpful, concerned, and a bit fearful. He is very
мелким, по крайней мере.
Fighting so that he can stay safe on the sidelines. He loves making deals and trying to upsell you. If you buy one of the items that Grog offers, he'll try to give you a more complex deal where he improves the item via crafting. If you accept this deal, he'll try to upsell you again and again until you eventually walk away with your purchase.
Ого, этот чувак, он может типа крафтить. То есть он предлагает моды. Класс. Это прикольный крафтинг.
His incremental crafting upgrades are priced rather cheaply. Gwenin is a cynical gambler who claims that luck depends on how hard you believe.
Прикольно.
So you really need to convince yourself that you're going to get that headhunter. If you don't, it's your fault. Gwenin shows you a set of base types with unknown properties. When you gamble by buying one, you'll receive a random item of that base type back.
Она, получается, продает шмотки рандомные. Рандомные ценности базы. Тут прикольные гэмблы будут.
It's possible to use a specific new currency item to re-roll the gamble window to a set of new items of your current level. Sometimes a base type shows up that is a lot more expensive than it would otherwise be, and gambling on this item has a higher expected value than normal. You're taking the risk, though, that it could still be junk. Danig, warrior scald, is the heart of the expedition, its brave leader and lawmaster. Danig is interested in specific types of ruined artifacts and wants to trade these from you for a variety of options, such as currency that lets you re-roll vendor inventories, logbooks, or artifacts that other Kalguran traders are looking for. You can talk to the traders in the wild, in town, or in your hideout. They grant you access to your expedition locker, which is like the heist locker, a lot more specific items, which can be accessed in all three places also. We're adding the affinity system to these lockers. Among the many relics of the ancient Kalgurans you might find at their expedition sites are logbooks. These ancient books chronicle the locations that their ancestors visited in their exploration of Rayclust.
Так, ну и они, получается, тут логбуки, это типа карта, по сути.
Each location within the logbook has its own implicit mods, as well as a theme that controls what types of remnants can be found there. Talk to Danig in your hideout and give him a logbook you have found to go on an expedition to one of the locations it describes. These are all exotic places that no exiles have ever traveled to before.
Второй атлас сюда.
Just like how a blighted map was one giant blighting.
Ну это скорее блайт-карта, да.
The expedition you go on from a logbook is one giant expedition. Expeditions from logbooks are not only different because of their large size, but because there are special objects that you can interact with using explosives. For example, trees that contain monsters or items, passageways that reveal chests or bosses, and so on. Speaking of bosses, there are some formidable ones for you to seek out. A set of valuable new unique
Блин,
items
круто выглядит как, а?
only come from expedition content. The Kalguran people are not from Rayclust, so the items do not have the same defensive properties that ours do. Instead of armor, evasion, and energy shield, they have ward.
У них есть...
This new base type is a pair of boots that grants ward.
Это новые базы.
The way that ward works is that you have a certain amount of it, and that amount is fully deducted from the first incoming hit that you receive. Your ward is then disabled and takes 5 seconds to re-enable. At that point, the next hit you receive is substantially mitigated in the same way. It's quite a different style of defensive property and works very well in conjunction with systems like evasion, block, or dodge.
Это как
As the undead enemies you unearth in expedition encounters are fallen Kogoran explorers, they also have a ward rather than traditional defenses. This unique helmet allows you to go all in with a defensive option for your character. It causes
У тебя есть пул, который списывается и восстанавливается 5 секунд.
Grants you a bunch of ward and helps it recover faster. This other unique helmet is also on a new base type that grants ward instead of other defense types, but its properties don't interact with ward. Instead, it prevents you from dealing critical strikes and grants you Battle Mage, which adds spell damage equal to the damage of your main hand weapon.
Забавно.
The new base types and uniques I showed you here are just some of the ones you'll be able to discover when you play next week. So that's the Expedition League. Each of the developers I've spoken to has liked a different aspect of it, but I have really personally been enjoying the different trade mechanics offered by the Kogoran NPCs. The gamble window takes us back 20 years on a nostalgic trip, and Tuyin's haggling manages to
идея гэмблинга с вендорами разными.
And anyone who really knows me knows how much I love negotiating. This expansion also promises to massively shake up the Path of Exile metagame, and we're doing that by introducing new gems, lots and lots of new gems. For quite a while now, the way we have approached new skills in Path of Exile expansions is to make a bunch of gems themed around an entirely new build or dramatically augmenting a few existing builds. The blood skills in the Ultimatum expansion are a good example of this. While this approach is great in terms of creating interesting new builds, it doesn't always affect every character game-wide. In order to achieve this big metagame shakeup, we've come up with a crazy idea for the Expedition expansion. Adding a gigantic pile of new gems at once, as many different playstyles as possible. Each of these gems can of course be used by many different classes, but we use the list of 19 ascendancy classes for inspiration when planning these gems.
То есть 19 классов и 19 гемов.
Gems that you can add to your character. Let's go through the 19 new skill and support gems. The Earthbreaker support gem can be
Earthbreaker support. К любому слэму.
It summons an ancestor totem that uses that slam on your behalf. In this example, we've created a build that summons multiple ancestor totems that each wield tectonic slam. As you can see, this build covers a large area in fiery death, while you get to stay out of harm's way. This is a powerful option for chieftains in particular.
Наконец-то слэмы на тотемах заиграют.
Adept players will also be wondering if the Earthbreaker support allows you to keep slamming totems, and the answer is absolutely.
Ой-ой. Ой-ой.
As with other ancestor totems, the Earthbreaker support also provides a buff to you.
Только не говорите, что это лига Earthquake с тотемами.
Rage Vortex provides a new way to consume your rage, unleashing a whirling
Rage Vortex?
hits enemies within its range. It gains damage and area of effect based on how much rage was sacrificed. It slows down when enemies survive being hit by it, causing it to deal intense damage to tough targets. While you can
Как будто не для ХЦ, да?
active at a time, characters such as berserkers who are able to generate a lot of rage quickly will find it a great way to augment their damage output. Bone Shatter strikes your enemies with a forceful blow. If an enemy is stunned by this attack, a powerful shockwave is released. The area effect of the shockwave is determined by the duration of the stun you inflicted.
Прикольно.
Each time you use Bone Shatter against an enemy, you take physical damage yourself and gain a trauma stack. The more
Он
stacks
типа
you have,
выпускает
the more damage
волну, когда ты станешь.
This self-damage
И чем дольше стан, тем больше волна.
because they have easy access to lots of armor to mitigate the downside. Also, the Juggernaut has ascendancy passives that grant increased stun duration, which help make sure the shockwave is as large as possible. Defiance Banner is a new purely defensive
Новый баннер?
skill. While you carry the
Defense.
Defiance Banner, it increases the armor and evasion of nearby allies while reducing the critical strike chance of nearby enemies.
О, редюсирует страйк шанс врагов, это круто.
And can be placed on the ground to enhance its effects. When the Defiance Banner is placed, it inflicts a taunt on enemies for a duration based on the number of stages the
Он
banner has.
таунт применяет. Блин, таунт это сильно, 10% митигейшн.
Also deal less damage to all targets. Мне
кажется, кастеры все будут юзать. То, что Armor Evasion и Talent.
These waves can shotgun enemies with up to 2 hits at once. So while Shield Crush is great against groups, it's also effective against single targets and can be used alongside Shield Charge and Spectral Shield Throw. We've improved both of these skills so that the overall aggressive shield build is more powerful.
Spectral Shield Throw еще бафнули. Его в прошлой лиге бафали.
The head support gem can only support strike skills and is basically like a mini headhunter. When a supported strike kills a rare enemy, you'll steal one of its modifiers. Obviously, this gem can't be as crazy as the full headhunter experience, so it comes with some restrictions. Stolen modifiers can persist for 20 seconds, and slaying another rare enemy will replace the modifier you have active. The behead support gem also grants you more damage against enemies on low life. In conjunction with the Slayer's Bane of Legends Ascendancy passive, this bonus really embraces the execution theme of the behead support.
Нани?
Storm Rain is a new bow skill that fires
Один
arrows
баф,
that stick
ну
into
да.
the ground. These arrows periodically pulse with lightning damage that arcs to nearby arrows.
Ой,
This
плохо
works
что-то
very
выглядит,
well
да?
with multiple projectiles because you can quickly set up a large patch of lightning death. Existing ballista skills in Path of Exile pick their own targets, like sentry guns do. They'll start shooting immediately and will generally target the closest enemies. While this behavior is usually great, sometimes you want fine control over what your ballistas will fire at. The focused ballista support gem causes your ballistas to pick the same targets as you.
О, прикольно, кстати. Саппорт, который заставляет баллист стрелять. Еще так спид дает, прикольно.
Explosive Concoction is quite a novel skill. It introduces several new concepts that haven't been explored with skills before. Here you can see the Pathfinder throwing an explosive projectile at monsters. First, you may notice that the Pathfinder isn't holding any weapons. This is because Explosive Concoction is the very first range skill that can and must be used unarmed.
Unarmed range skill?
It interacts with the benefits provided by your flasks. When you throw your Explosive Concoction onto a targeted area, it deals fire damage and uses
Блин, это круто выглядит. The fuck?
flasks grant bonuses based on what flask charges were used.
С бутылками кидаться ходить.
The appropriate flasks or charges to consume, but correctly managing your flask setup can greatly enhance the power of this skill. What we really love about this gem is that it brings to life the idea of throwing your flasks at enemies and having them explode. In conjunction with the flask-focused benefits provided by the Pathfinder's Ascendancy passive skills, we're really excited to see what new playstyles are enabled by this gem.
Забавно.
This is the Ambush skill. It teleports you up to an enemy, blinds them, and exerts your next one-handed melee attack. This exerted attack
Exerted one-hand melee?
and multiplier. In addition to this helping your assassinations, you can also use Ambush to quickly re-engage targets after dashing away.
Прикольно выглядит.
Burst grants a buff that counts down to 0, triggering a burst of lightning damage around you with a portion of that damage converted to chaos.
Это сильно выглядит.
By your Voltaxic bursts will also explode, dealing chaos damage around them based on their maximum life.
Это очень сильно выглядит.
Voltaxic bursts on yourself at the same time. Consider using duration modifiers to modify the timing of the explosion so that you can cast the spell from safety and then move into a strategic position before it explodes.
Это так сильно для маппинга
When
выглядит.
you use Blade Trap, you throw out a mechanical device with 2 copies of your weapon attached. These blades spin rapidly in a circle a set number of times.
Spin me right now, baby, right
When dual
now.
wielding, the trap rotates faster but deals damage based on both weapons. Because it's a trap, Blade Trap behaves a little differently to other attack skills by operating independently of your attack speed. This means you'll have some interesting itemization choices to make and focusing more on damage modifiers rather than the typical focus of maximizing attack speed.
БВ умер ради этого.
Summon Reaper creates a single powerful minion that uses fast melee physical attacks which cause bleeding. While
Ого.
the Reaper is active, you can use the skill again to direct the Reaper to a specific location, dealing a powerful attack.
Прикольная анимация
The
вообще.
Reaper wants to be your only minion. It reduces the life and damage of your other minions, and will consume them to heal itself and gain damage and speed buffs.
Ого.
When designing this new skill for the Necromancer, we
Wow.
wanted to explore the idea of having a single ultimate minion. While there were ways to somewhat achieve this before, the Reaper is quite different in its abilities and interactions
Класс.
with other minions. It also feels much more active and directly under your control.
Анимация выглядит очень круто.
Absolutely eat your animated guardian if you're not careful.
Ой.
Forbidden Rite is a
Съедает
powerful
самонов.
missile that fires an exploding chaos
Только
projectile
Свистин
that targets
появится.
It also targets a selection of enemies in an area around the player's location and fires projectiles at them too. But be careful, Forbidden Right also inflicts damage on you when cast. If you can find a clever way to mitigate this harmful downside, you'll have devastating and widespread damage at your fingertips.
Это выглядит тоже сильно. Но это за счет взрывов, мне кажется, выглядит сильно.
Eye of Winter is a large projectile that fires out a barrage of cold projectiles in a spiral formation as it travels. When it reaches its maximum distance or collides with the terrain, it explodes, firing out even more projectiles.
Вау, вот это скилл.
This type of skill is one we've been wanting to bring to Path of Exile.
А вот это скилл.
We felt this new collection of skills was the perfect place to showcase it.
А вот это
This
скилл.
Inquisitor is using the new Battle Mage's Cry skill, which taunts nearby enemies and exerts your subsequent attacks, causing them to trigger a linked spell in your next melee
Это
hit.
триггер
Here
новый.
you can see the player taunting enemies with Battle Mage's Cry and using
Выглядит дико, давай.
The slam is exerted, triggering Firestorm to rain down the In order to assist with scaling both attack and spell damage, the buff this Warcry provides lets your spell damage apply.
Блин, на софте, мне кажется, очень весело бы такие билды делать.
Mana Bond is a somewhat unusual gem in that its source of power relies on your current mana. Upon use, it creates a rune that explodes at a location you're targeting. This explosion can either deal more damage or cover a larger area depending on the state of your mana.
Ага, чем больше маны у тебя. А, чем у тебя меньше маны, тем он больше дэмэджа делает. А при этом, чем больше у тебя маны, тем больше АОЕ. И хрена себе АОЕ, что за жесть? The fuck? The fuck?
Absolution has been designed for Guardians as a spell version of Dominating Blow.
Спелл-версия Dominating Blow? The fuck?
When it kills an enemy, it summons a Sentinel of Absolution, which also deals damage by casting Absolution itself. The Sentinels also periodically cast a larger
Вот это прикольно выглядит.
While the Sentinel's version of Absolution can't summon even more minions, they are a powerful army to fight against. Spectral Helix throws a spectral copy of your melee weapon, which spirals outwards from you, dealing damage to any
Нет, почему это так плохо выглядит?
The design of this skill achieves what we always wanted Val Spectral throw.
Почему так плохо выглядит? А, вот это лучше. А вот это лучше.
It wasn't possible to use Val Spectral Throw as a primary skill.
Почему Лига не сейчас?
Can live up to this purpose. We've reworked Val Spectral Throw, which we'll reveal closer to release. One of the other issues that Val Spectral Throw had was that it didn't work very well in indoors areas. However, Spectral Helix improves upon this, as the projectiles that spiral outwards can also bounce off of walls and
Блин,
proceed to hit
от стенок прыгать
enemies,
будет.
simply disappearing upon collision.
Свал версии Spectral Throw.
Over the last few years,
Лютый
Path of
сингл,
Exile
может
has
быть.
really suffered from player power creep.
Так.
As a consequence of trying to make compelling content, each expansion we release either gives players more axes on which to improve
Окей,
their character,
идиот, давай, мочи всех.
or ways to craft better and more
Пускай
powerful
все
items.
плачут.
Measuring from closed beta to now, this Expedition expansion is our 30th Path of Exile release. The amount
Пускай
of
все
power creep
плачут.
varies per release, of course, with systems like Ascendus
А, тебе еще Вивера в 2 раза сильнее, чтобы все прям... Чтобы все рыдали.
Like with compound interest, it would only take 8% more player power per expansion from new items.
Знаете, к чему это ведет? То, что вот это вот окажется вот здесь.
And tenfold is roughly what we measure the increase in player power to be. We may nerf the most out-of-hand cases every launch, but we're only reducing them back down to close to the new baseline. The average Path of Exile character gets more and more powerful.
Ну, говорит, что средний персонаж все сильнее и сильнее становится с каждой лигой. Это правда. Да, некоторые игры решают проблему, усложняя бесконечно монстров, но это типа очень дешевый подход. Они так не хотят. Такое дешевое решение. Другая проблема, да, заключается в том, что персонажи, люди все равно выбирают лучшую опцию. Не обязательно самые фановые.
The balance changes that we are making in Expedition are far-reaching and are going to affect almost all characters. Our goal is not to just nerf specific builds, but to improve the game, its challenge, and to make sure that people want to pick fun build choices.
Так.
Anyone who played Path of Exile during its closed beta 9 years ago can attest to how challenging the campaign was to play through. Early monsters were dangerous and terrifying, able to kill a character in a few seconds of inattention. Players feared going into the ship graveyard cave because of the flames.
Ой-ой-ой-ой-ой-ой.
Because a couple of unlucky characters could outright kill them.
Ой-ой-ой. Это современный движок.
Nowadays, however, the game is a lot easier. We added level 2 and 4 support gems without increasing the difficulty of the game to compensate at all. Modern League mechanics shower the player in rare items from early levels, and we didn't make the game any harder in response. In fact, it's very interesting to compare the difficulty of League content with that of the base game. For a few years now, we've been shipping difficult leagues where monster life and damage values are a lot higher than the regular monsters that players fight between those League encounters. Players enjoy League content because it's challenging. They also told us they really enjoyed the Path of Exile 2 demo at ExileCon, and it was tuned to be almost punitive in terms of difficulty. One thing we learned from building that demo was that it's okay for some monsters to be able to run 20 to 40% faster than the player. In Path of Exile 1's first act, there isn't a single monster that moves faster than the player's default movement speed. We are rebalancing the campaign to be challenging. So far, we have focused mostly on Act 1, but with each coming expansion, we'll be extending this further. Our plan is that within a year or so, we'll have reviewed or touched every single monster in the game.
Они говорят, типа не сразу, постепенно будут делать.
Most skilled players easily dominating the campaign or running through it to get to maps quickly. It will mean that players who engage with the content will find a consistent difficulty level between League content and regular content. It's worth noting that the behavioral and balance changes to monsters will definitely affect their map versions.
Слушайте, движок как будто реально поменялся, лучше выглядит.
Path of Exile players and developers have been keen for a big rework to its flask.
Фласки?
In the end game, flasks
Реально фласки? Дождались.
And these buffs allow the player to kill monsters quickly,
О-оу.
so they can be used as soon as they run out.
Достаем свои палочки.
Correct behavior was to spam the 1 to 5 keys repeatedly to keep all the flasks constantly up without any downsides. This flask piano playstyle was popular enough that players were improvising devices to hit all of those keys. Spamming the same set of keys repeatedly to get a powerful set of buffs that rival the power you get from your entire set of equipped items is not a fun game mechanic. It's unbalanced and certainly isn't nice on your wrist.
Да, это давно проблема. Я не верил, то, что они до PoE 2 решат менять систему фласк.
It was pretty clear to us that Path of Exile will be a lot better if we did some serious work on flasks to make sure that incentives were aligned with fun rather than with spamming blindly. Most utility flasks and unique flasks have been rebalanced. Expect a lot less permanent power from
Chill ground?
Flasks that provide raw defense or raw power are the ones with the biggest nerfs.
Immunity to ignite?
Flasks have been selectively buffed a bit if they were underpowered or less popular. In the Expedition expansion, there are now 3 ways that you can use flasks. You can either continue to use the rebalanced ones the traditional way, or you can apply one of the 2 new types of currency items.
Две новые
The Instilling Orb and Enkindling Orb
орбы,
part of the regular
которые имеют фласки.
monsters and chests. The Instilling Orb will cause a flask to be used automatically upon a specific condition being met.
Фласка используется автоматически при определенном событии. Вау!
With the only trade-off being that it may consume charges that you otherwise wouldn't intend it to. There are a variety of
Типа, если тебя заигнать, она хоп, срабатывает.
overwriting the others each time you use an Instilling Orb on it. The Enkindling Orb prevents utility flasks from gaining charges while active, but provides a big boost to their effect.
Большой буст эффекту, дюрейшену, но ты не можешь генерить чарджи, пока она активна. Круто.
When a flask removes a curse, it no longer applies a period of immunity to curses. Flasks that remove ailments now only provide a period of immunity to that ailment if they actually removed it. So if you get ignited, use a dowsing flask to remove the ignite and to gain immunity for a while.
Нифига себе. То есть, если сейчас, если ты обычную фласку нажимаешь, то ты не иммун, у тебя нет иммуна, тебе нужно нажимать, когда тебя... это жесть.
Monster density in Path of Exile gets a lot higher as you play through the game. When we initially balanced blast charge generation a decade ago, we did not anticipate the levels of monster density we would reach by 2021.
Это на самом деле огромное изменение. Это круто.
So now there's a lot more strategy involved with flask use. Flasks don't gain as many charges, so are a little harder to constantly
Это круто.
and aren't designed to provide such a powerful slew of permanent buffs. But you can control which
О, это будет так сложно привыкать. Но это правильное изменение.
Existing flasks such as basalt and aquamarine flasks, and have introduced new corundum and gold flasks.
Корунд и голд фласк.
For a while now, we've been concerned with a power gap between support gems. There are gems that grant huge multiplicative damage.
Баланс support гемов. Окей, идет, они не шутили. Они не шутили с балансом.
We are reducing the damage bonuses on the support gems that are clearly just about huge damage boosts and trying to give them impactful and appropriate.
Короче, они выравнивают
the controlled destruction support gem now penalizes critical strikes.
Саппорт гемы.
Overall, this works out to a total of somewhere around 20%, potentially as high as 40% damage reduction for a character using a fully 6-linked skill with entirely damaged support gems. There's much less impact for characters that use utility support gems or those who didn't have a 6-link setup. This achieves two goals for us. Firstly, the gap between good and bad support gems has been narrowed, creating more interesting build opportunities. Secondly, player damage output in the endgame is reduced, which is a goal for this balance.
Player damage еще reduced.
We want to iteratively restore challenge to Path of Exile. It's worth clarifying that we haven't buffed and used utility support gems as part of this balance pass. It's fully intentional that it's a reduction of power for the most damaging ones.
Жесть.
When we're designing skills for Path of Exile, the mana cost of the skill is a mechanism to allow us to have larger impactful effects. Bigger skills should cost more mana to cast. Unfortunately, this entire mechanism is currently bypassed by triggering skills as this skips their mana cost. This basically means that we can't design really powerful spells. In 3.15, triggering skills through support gems will require paying their mana cost. In fact, sometimes it now costs more than casting the gem by hand.
Триггер сплейтеры будут стоить ману. Ну, либо не ману. Правильно. Но теперь, да, за Торкин Сюш можно юзать и так далее. То есть всякие коки теперь.
Now let's talk about movement skills. As you know, most interaction with monster behavior is essentially bypassed if you're using an extremely effective movement skill. This is okay if you're specialized deeply into customizing that skill, but it's currently the default state for any character if you use Flame Dash, Smoke Mine, or Dash without any further investment. These skills have been rebalanced to be more in line with other movement skills. These are not huge numeric nerfs, but do mean that there is scope for improving the performance of the skills by specializing around them.
Ну, короче, не сильно они поменяются, понял. Короче, Flame Dash не шпанут.
We completely understand that this level of change will make some people nervous, but it's time we start actively combating power creep and fixing game systems that haven't been working the way we intended them to. I think that the metagame of Expedition is going to be fascinating. The reduction of overall player power, combined with all of the opportunities from the new skills and flask system changes, should create entirely new sets of builds that we've previously seen. You guys are always surprising us with what you do, and we can't wait to see what you come up with here. So back in early 2018, there was a trend where every online game was releasing Royal mode and getting Royal. We had a running joke in the office that our fast development speed meant that we could probably add a Battle Royale mode to Path of Exile in one day of development. As April Fool's Day approached, we tried to do exactly that.
Ну да, кто не знает, рояль это, ну как типа любая рояль игра, тебя выкидывают на пляж, еще 100 человек, арена сужается, и вы подбираете шмотки с пола и деретесь за, типа, за топ-1. Это было очень круто, это очень весело. Вот. То есть недельку работала на 1 апреля. 3 или 4 года назад. Вот. Но это типа слишком стоило дорого, типа по сервакам и так далее.
but the community did not forget. In fact, they've been quite keen to remember it constantly and to urge us to bring it back. But that wouldn't be easy.
Ну вот, народ просил, чтобы вернули. И они, походу, вернули.
A few months ago, we decided to do exactly that.
Несколько месяцев назад они решили вернуть. Сегодня? Сразу? Сегодня? Короче, готовится к лиге. Короче, PoE Рояль сегодня.
Our initial version of Royale from 2018 used Path of Exile's default passive skill tree, which didn't have interesting options for characters that rarely got to level 10.
Так.
It also used all of our skill gems and unique items as is, where many of the interesting ones were way too high level for these super low level characters to find. We've made a completely new
Нифига себе, новая ветка! Вау! Новая ветка для рояля.
It features approximately 90 new custom notable passes,
19
special new
нотаблов.
windows so you can stay aware of your surroundings while allocating skills, and you
И специально пол экрана, чтобы можно было раскидывать по ходу. Класс! Вот это вау!
We have created low-level versions of around 50 iconic skill gems, 20 support gems, and over 70
low-level версии камней, которые на более высокие доступны, и уники. Короче, они адаптировали всякие прикольные уники и гемы под более низкие левелы. Да, при этом карту они постарались. Блин, карта будет круто. Они поставили вот эти вот сокровищницы с фласками, чтобы пополнить фласки можно было. Ой, можно шмотки поднимать, смотрите, как будто в стаж заходишь. Ага, просто новый персонаж создаешь, и он юзается каждый раз заново, типа не нужно...
It's a bit like a challenge league totem as it grows more impressive as you win more.
Ох, рототемы!
Royale is available to play today.
Рототемы.
Q&A session concludes in about 45 minutes. So
да, шмотки с трупа, да.
And when we're done with the Q&A, log in and click to join the Royale event at the bottom right of the screen. For more detailed information on how the mode works, check out the news post we just made on pathofexile.com. We'll be running the event from today over the weekend.
Вот, короче... Да, говорят, что если будет популярно, то будет каждую неделю запускать. Короче, надо катать. А на сегодня, да. После Q&A.
Path of Exile 2, and special modes like Royale. The Soulkeeper and Aesir supporter packs come with masses of points to spend in the store, social frames, forum titles, and badges, digital soundtrack, and of course exclusive cosmetic microtransactions like armor sets and weapon skins. The Soulkeeper series comes with an exclusive pet, and the Aesir series an exclusive set of wings. On top of the traditional small and medium-sized supporter packs that are consistent with ones we've released in the past, we're also adding an optional new third tier for each series. This new tier includes an exclusive apparition portal effect and a slightly better ratio of points per dollar spent. The introduction of these new packs should give you more options for what combination of each pack.
Ну, короче, новый пак еще вводят. Новый тир пака. Портал прикольный.
Thank you so much for your support.
Сейчас Q&A будет. Смотрите, тут таймер рояль начинается через 43 минуты батл рояль начинается. Они не хотят, чтобы мы смотрели бэкласт. Саппорт паки за 30, 60, 90 баксов уже на сайте. Окей. Рояль, конечно, мем. Ну надо катать в рояль, получается. А не вот это вот все. Короче, игра сложнее. Игроки слабее. Мув скиллы нафиг. Фласки вообще все по-другому. Все по-другому. Стрим рояля, естественно.